by 2050. So let's get started. So this is what I'm going to cover today. So I'm going to give a brief history of electricity and how it's been central to human development for millennia, and it's going to continue to do exactly that, to move us to a sustainable way of living. So that moves us on to point 2. What is the transition and why is it needed? So I'm going to outline that, and then I'm going to dig into what is RE100 and how it helps support this transition. And then finally, I'll look at what we need to achieve and by when. So look at the timeline to align with the Paris Agreement that a large number of companies have committed to, and how renewable electricity fits into that, and whether we're on track to meet those goals. So how did we get here? So as I said in my introduction, electricity has been at front and center of human development for millennia. So it's referenced in ancient texts back to ancient Egypt in 2750 BC, and similarly in texts from ancient Greece, Rome, and the Arab world. It was formally studied in 1600 by English, by the English scientist William Gilbert, who made a careful study of electricity and magnetism in the 18th century. Benjamin Franklin conducted extensive research in electricity, concluding that lightning was indeed electrical in nature. Michael Faraday invented the electric motor in 1821, and the late 19th century would see the greatest progress in electrical engineering through such people as Alexander Graham Bell, Thomas Edison, and Nikola Tesla. Among others, electricity turned from a scientific curiosity into an essential tool for modern life. Solid state electronics came into its own with the emergence of transistor technology, with the first working transistor being invented in 1947. Silicon then allowed the manufacture of much smaller transistors, leading to the silicon revolution of 1959 onwards, and has led to the microprocessor chips and semiconductor memory of today. Electricity is now a fact of life, with 87% of the world having access to it as of 2016. Batteries allow us to take it everywhere with us now, and the emergence of wireless technology, wireless charging, will make this even easier. Modern life could not exist without it, but it's also critical to our sustainable future. So, what is the transition and why is it needed? So let me just check that I've got sound shared, and I will share this video with you. I think this video sums things up nicely, so I'll leave it with you.
This is my place, my planet. We have many things in common. Today I look back on a journey that was long and brave. Intelligence gave me the ability to adapt myself to the environment and its changes. Without it, survival would be impossible. This intelligence made me evolve at the speed of light and achieve great things. We discovered fire, built shelters, invented the wheel, discovered electricity, made the Industrial Revolution, and went to the moon. But at the same time, that speed blinded me. Didn't let me see the race, just the goal. And along the way, there was distraction. Distraction to my planet, to my place. Today, climate change is a fact. It's not just about tons of CO2. It's about serious climate events happening at incredible rates. Every single day, faster. We have to stop. put on the brakes, think anew, act anew, and design a sustainable future. That future will rely on a joint commitment with the planet, a commitment to climate ambition and get rid of emissions. How can we do that? It's simple. The lifeblood of a decarbonized future is already at hand. It's electricity. Deep decarbonization of our society relies on deep electrification. Our cars, industry, and buildings need to be electric. Electricity is the solution for a climate-friendly future. The journey I see ahead of me is a prosperous one of cities with no pollution from cars, industry, but one where people are connected and empowered by digital services. We can break out of the carbon-intensive cycle if we make the right choice. That choice is electricity. The European power sector is ready to lead, ready to power the world of tomorrow, a world in balance. We are focused on the journey ahead because this is our planet, our place.
And that's hit the nail on the head. So electricity will be front and center of the world's move to decarbonize. We need to electrify as much as possible and then ensure that that electricity is clean. So now I'm going to ask you to brainstorm. So I'm not sure how easily this is going to work for everybody, but if you go to slide.do on a browser or on your mobile device and use the access code hashtag RE100, I want you to think about what we can electrify to decarbonize. What functions of everyday life or sectors can you think of that we can electrify with renewable electricity to allow us to get to this net zero future? So this should now be live. So please you can join on at slido.com and use hashtag RE100 to log in. So I'll give you a couple of minutes to see if we get some responses.
Thank you, Ross. I'm going to use my phone, I think, to do this.
Sure. Yeah, I think that might be slightly easier.
Now, as a renewable energy expert myself, I'm hoping that my suggestions are going to be quite good ones. Right,
Yeah.
here we go.
I can see responses starting to come in, so that's good. I'll give this some extra time. Great. So we've had, looks like 11 responses. So let's see what we've got from that. So heating, a lot of people mentioned heating, which is great. Cooling as well, which is great. Those. So we've got a sister initiative, EP100, which focuses on energy productivity, and they're doing a lot of work. They've got a cooling challenge that they ask companies to sign up to. So that's something that they're focusing on. Heating, RE100 is actually looking to expand our work into heat because we see that this is the next one of the key frontiers for stuff. And I can see that cars, also quite a few people have mentioned cars. We also have another sister initiative, which I'll talk about in a second, about EV100. So it's about electric vehicles and committing to that. But yeah, there's loads of other stuff massive amounts of our lifestyle can be electrified. So travel, road and rail, agricultural equipment, aeroplanes, bikes, transportation. Yeah, so you guys have got the idea. Basically, we need to electrify as much as possible, and there's good scope to do that, which gives us good hope for the future. So there's two reasons why electricity is a good focus for decarbonisation. So currently, electricity represents the largest source of greenhouse gas emissions. So looking at this pie chart, globally, you can see it represents around 26% of emissions. And that's as it currently stands. But this is only going to increase as regions of the world become increasingly developed. You can see here that every region of the world is going to increase its projected consumption of electricity up to 2030. And part of that increased consumption is also looking at the fact that as we look to decarbonise, our reliance on electricity will increase as we look to electrify as much as possible. So all those things that you noted down on the brainstorm there. So energy represents by far the largest contributor of greenhouse gas emissions.
We'll have a
and we will,
with your ability to counsel them effectively.
And we will look to electrify as much of this as possible. So you can see the energy section there is quite large, and you can see that that's broken down. So if we can electrify as much of that as possible and then clean the grid, that's the best way forward. The World Economic Forum has stated that electricity will become the most important form of energy in the future as we look to electrify across our economies. That's why experts are talking about an electricity transition as the fundamental part of our energy transition. The transition from a fossil fuel dominated power sector to a more sustainable system dominated by renewables, since electricity represents an energy form that has maximum flexibility. So what is RE100 and how does it help accelerate this transition? How does it fit into this picture? So at the Climate Group, we work with leaders and decision makers from business and government because they shape the market frameworks that help the world achieve net zero emissions by 2050. They have the tools and the influence to make it possible in the time that we have left. These are our initiatives focused on businesses. The Climate Group's work focuses on systems with the highest emissions and where our networks have the greatest opportunity to drive change. So those are transport, the built environment, industry, food, and energy. And RE100 fits under the energy system along with its sister initiative, EP100, which focuses on energy productivity. EV100, as I mentioned, sits in the transport system, accelerating the transition to electric vehicles. So RE100 is a global collaborative initiative unifying influential businesses committed to 100% renewable electricity. The mission of the campaign is to accelerate change towards zero carbon grids globally by 2040. And RE100's role in that is to send the demand signal and bring companies together to create political space in order for RE100 priority markets to adopt RE100 global policy asks, leading to mass deployment of renewables on the grid. It's quite a mouthful. So if you have any questions around that, we can cover them afterwards. So the core team is based in London with colleagues. This isn't, it seems like we're stuck. Oh, sorry. There we are. So the core team is based in London with colleagues in the US, India, and China. We also have regional hubs in South Korea, Japan, Australia, and Taiwan. And we're also looking at potentially expanding our work in Southeast Asia, South Africa, and Russia. So this is our ever-growing logo slide covering a huge number of industries and sectors. Here you'll see many global household names. An interesting fact, if you look at our membership by country at the beginning of this month, Japan overtook the UK to become the second largest geography represented in our membership, and that's behind the US. We're seeing ever increasing appetite for renewables in Asia, which is really encouraging. This is good news, as Asia is the highest coal consuming region in the world, and coal is the dirtiest form of electric power generation. Our members have also asked us to focus on helping them to push for renewables sourcing in this region, because that's a region they're finding quite challenging. If RE100 were a country, it would be the 13th largest electricity consuming country in the world, which is more electricity than it takes to power Italy. This gives us real clout on the global stage when pushing for greater access to renewables. All of this electricity is committed to 100% renewable. So today we're currently on 288 members. As you'll see, 2028 is the average target year for members to reach their 100% target. You can see the distribution of target years for our members in the bottom right. As I said, we've been growing significantly in the Asia Pacific region over the past 18 to 24 months. And these companies, because it's a more challenging market, they're joining with later target dates. So we're seeing that slight start to skew towards 2050 more. But yeah, it's really encouraging because Asia is the biggest coal consuming region in the world, with China and India consuming the most worldwide, and Japan is in 4th place, just behind the US. So we really need that region to engage to get things to move forward. This chart highlights our members' progress towards 100% renewable electricity. Of our members, 1/3 are already at 75% renewable electricity, and 53 have met their 100% target. You can see a leveling off in terms of progress towards 100% more recently. This is because of the geographic shift of our membership. So initially, members were joining from North America and Europe, where there's good renewable sourcing options. But recently, our expansion has been largely in Asia, which is a much more challenging market. So companies are joining with a much smaller proportion of renewables in their electricity mix. Hopefully, as the market develops here and through our work in the region, we'll see this start to rise again more steeply. Here's a quick insight into the winners of the 2020 RE100 Leadership Awards that were held for the first time at our annual climate conference, Climate Week New York, which we hold in conjunction with the UN in New York City every year in September. They celebrate the achievements of our members in areas such as collaboration, supply chain work, and policy engagement. And this gives you a good flavour of the innovation and ambition of our leading members that will hopefully inspire companies to push further with their electricity strategies. So I'll just play this one for you.
The global corporate renewables movement, led by RE100, is growing rapidly. And as more and more companies commit to 100% renewable electricity, the leadership bar is rising. Here at the Climate Group, we're delighted to be shining a spotlight on some of those leaders.
RE100 members disclose on their renewables progress annually through CDP. We have found that when companies see that others are acting, it can create a real snowball effect. These leader stories will help inspire other companies to act, will boost ambition, and will help drive the clean energy transition.
At Schneider, we are deliberate about efficiency, electrification, and decarbonization through renewables. It's really the only path to a resilient, sustainable future. It is central to how we operate our business, serve our customers, and support our communities. And yes, there is a long way for us to go, but we want to be the change. And right now, we're doing it.
Having Iron Mountain fully attest to the renewable energy they are giving us is a huge win and a net benefit. In the New Jersey facility, power reporting is one less thing that we have to do. One of the most exciting things that the Edison facility has to offer is the solar top array. And this is creating a microgrid within the actual data center itself. And it's incredible to see a data center operation go as far as Iron Mountain has.
For us, it wasn't enough to have 100% renewable electricity.
Chanel and Sunrun's partnership will support bringing clean, affordable energy to 30,000 low-income residents in communities that need it the most.
Represents around $600 in cost savings for them, which is on average about 5% of their annual income.
We felt by setting the high ambition of getting to renewable power 5 years later, we would actually unlock a lot of energy, a lot of ideas, excitement among partners to collaborate with us to achieve that common goal. My advice to others would be to dare to set a bold ambition, collaborate, but also engage your own people in finding the solutions.
TSMC is Taiwan's largest purchaser of clean energy. In 2019, we purchased 910 gigawatt hours of renewable energy certificates, and the carbon credits, enabling our overseas facilities to be 100% powered by clean energy. We look forward to working with fellow members toward a lower carbon industrial footprint and a greener Earth.
We recently set a new ambitious goal to transition our entire manufacturing supply chain to 100% renewable electricity by 2030. As of June 2020, 71 manufacturing partners in 17 different countries have committed to 100% renewable electricity for Apple. Once completed, their efforts will avoid over 14.3 million metric tons of CO2e annually, the equivalent of taking more than 3 million cars off the road each year.
It's no longer enough for Salesforce or any other company to think only about its own footprint. If we don't speak up, if we don't work with governments to be bold and to create a sustainable future for all, then we've already lost. That's why Salesforce is committed to using our voice to advocate for clear and consistent science-based climate policies. We hope you'll join us.
ENGIE is committed to doubling its installed renewable energy capacity by 2025. We look forward to seeing what each of you have to offer the next year and the years to come. All of us at ENGIE are grateful. You are leading the world to a more sustainable future, and we want to be part of it.
Companies are doing fantastic things. They're not only buying renewable electricity at scale, they're also engaging with their suppliers, they're engaging with their communities, and engaging with policymakers to open up markets globally to enable companies to buy renewable electricity at a fair price anywhere in the world. But we need to act faster. We're 1 year into the climate decade. We have 9 years left to halve our carbon emissions. So there's never been a better time for companies to step up, join this movement, commit to 100% renewable electricity, and help drive the energy transition at the pace we need.
I think that those examples there really illustrate the ambition of our membership, which is really exciting to see the things that they're doing and the wider impacts that it's having. So sort of helping communities and yeah, pushing it out through their supply chains. So yeah, it's fantastic to appreciate the work that our members are doing. So why do companies switch to renewable electricity? These are the reasons that our members tell us as to why they're sourcing renewable electricity, and it's becoming ever more important for companies to manage and reduce their emissions and to be seen as responsible citizens. This explains the top two reasons our members have given, so managing their emissions and corporate social responsibility commitments. Customer expectations are also now a major concern for member companies, and you can see it there in third place. Price is also an important consideration. Just to give you an idea of how price of renewable electricity has shifted over the 5 years between 2014 and 2019, there's been a huge shift in price in many key countries. So on the left in 2014, you can see that by far coal and gas are the cheapest sources of electricity. But as the markets have developed, in 2019, you can see that wind and solar have now overtaken in terms of these markets, and they are now the majority cheapest for this group of countries, which is really exciting. So this is a quick overview of some key figures from the last year. So solar PV and onshore wind are now the cheapest sources of power for at least 2/3 of the global population. Offshore wind will surge to over 234 gigawatts by 2030, led by the Asia Pacific region. $54 billion has already been committed to a green recovery by governments as of July 2020, so that's probably more by now, which is great. Replacing the costliest 500 gigawatts of coal with solar and wind would cut annual system costs by up to $23 billion per year. And banks are responding to financial and social drivers to divest from coal, which is really encouraging as well. According to the Global Wind Energy Council Market Intelligence, offshore wind is being seen as a major contributor to the post-COVID economic recovery for governments. According to Bloomberg New Energy Finance, no government has responded to the economic crisis by downgrading its efforts to reducing emissions. So that's really encouraging as well. So sustainability is at the forefront of recovery efforts. Moving on to, oh, I've lost my, bear with me. Sorry, I've lost my notes.
Want to fill in?
No, we're back on track.
Okay. I've seen this graph myself recently, so.
This is corporate PPA activity, and it was up in 2020, which is great. So power purchase agreements are long-term contracts that corporates have with electricity suppliers, guaranteeing them revenue and allowing them to invest in renewable projects. Renewables can be more volatile sources of energy. Power purchase agreements provide financial certainty to companies and project developers, which removes a significant roadblock to building renewable facilities. The domination of the US in terms of PPA volumes has slackened, where COVID has depressed corporate PPA activity. In 2020, corporate PPAs in Europe, the Middle East, and Africa nearly tripled. The Asia Pacific region also saw record clean energy volumes, with corporations announcing contracts of 2.9 gigawatts of solar and wind. Taiwan has emerged as a major corporate clean energy market in 2020, supported by a new policy that requires companies with an annual load above 5 megawatts to buy clean power. TSMC, the world's largest semiconductor foundry based in Taiwan, joined RE100 in July and then signed the world's largest PPA. According to Bloomberg New Energy Finance, this year is set to see South Korea emerge as the next big corporate procurement market in Asia after policymakers revised the country's Electric Utility Act, creating a PPA mechanism and a green tariff program with Korea Electric Power Corporation. We have been doing a lot of policy work in South Korea, so this is fantastic news for us at RE100, and we had our first South Korean members join in November last year, so we're really starting to gain traction in South Korea as well, which is brilliant. This is the updated Bloomberg New Energy Finance RE100 forecast. The current group of RE100 members will need to purchase an additional 224 terawatt hours of clean electricity in 2030 to meet their 100% renewable goals. This clean electricity shortfall is up 62 terawatt hours from BNEF's original RE100 forecast produced in early 2018. So the takeaway, the campaign is growing faster than developers can supply it. Demand from new RE100 members is far outstripping clean energy supply. This presents a huge opportunity for developers, utilities, and investors to capitalise on this growth. So, what happens after companies reach their 100% target? Our members are leading the way on mainstreaming renewables and becoming really ambitious and actually going beyond their own operations. 44% are already asking their suppliers to use renewables. Some key examples, you saw in the video, Apple are now asking their suppliers to be 100% renewable by 2030, which is great. One of their biggest suppliers, TSMC, as I said, joined RE100 in July, which is an effect of that. BT work very closely with their suppliers, and so do AB InBev and DSM. Many companies have developed learning toolkits and educate their suppliers on renewable procurement. A lot of key suppliers, especially in the fashion industry, are based in Southeast Asia, a region known for dirty power. So this type of work is extremely important to bringing renewables to all markets across the globe. RE100 are looking to more actively work with supply chains with a particular focus on the fashion industry in future. Another big area of our work is policy. So last year, we released our global policy asks, and that's what you can see on screen. So these are things that RE100 would like to see in markets to allow corporate sourcing of renewable electricity at scale. In many countries, such as Japan and South Korea, the policy landscape is a key barrier to companies switching to 100% renewable electricity. Many of our members are actively involved in our policy engagement work. I mentioned earlier that we've been doing this in South Korea, but we've also set up policy working groups in Japan and India as well. By bringing together governments and corporates on renewable electricity, we feel we stand a fighting chance to fight climate change. Transparency is also key to our initiative. Our latest annual report was released in December, and we've managed to get more granular data from our members about their operations and the markets in which they're finding it really difficult to source renewables, and to explain the barriers that they're facing in those regions. The top 10 challenging geographies that they highlighted were Singapore, South Korea, Australia, Indonesia, Russia, Taiwan, Argentina, Japan, China, and New Zealand. And you can see at the bottom of the slide there, there's varying reasons across those geographies as to why companies are finding those the most challenging. Over the last year, we've achieved many successes, and as you can see, these are currently largely focused on Asia, which we know needs to decarbonise quickly and is a priority for our members. So we've had direct policy influence in the EU, Korea, and Japan. RE100 was publicly endorsed by President Tsai of Taiwan as a critical consideration for industrial policy. RE100 was cited in Japan's COVID stimulus package as a reason for investment in renewables. There's also been special mentions of the initiative by South Korean ministries, and we've decided to up our support in the region as well. So we released a Japan market report last year, and we've also increased our member meetings across the region to support our members there. And as I mentioned earlier as well, here are some other examples of where we're looking to extend our work in future. So renewable heat is there, carbon neutrality, coal divestment, new technologies, new developing markets. So we're looking at Russia and South Africa most prominently at the moment, and increased collaboration. So COVID recovery, what's this done to the situation? We've covered a bit of this. So to gauge our members' thoughts on recovery from the pandemic, the Climate Group launched a survey and also hosted a roundtable last year, and some of the key findings are on screen at the moment. So virtually all companies say that climate action is just as important as it was before the pandemic. Business still rate it as an important issue. Importantly, 1 in 2 businesses need supportive government policies to help them achieve sustainability goals. And this aligns with the main focus of the RE100 campaign at the moment in using our influence and credibility to affect government policies to unlock renewable sourcing. There's also majority support for recovery investment to be targeted at sectors that decarbonize the economy, which is good news for renewables. So despite the coronavirus pandemic, we're still continuing to see healthy growth in the campaign, with no slowing in growth last year, with 65 new members joining in 2020, which is great. Another big highlight is that Alok Sharma, COP26 president, has called for companies to join RE100, recognizing the initiative as an important change agent. So, what do we need to achieve and by when to align with the Paris Agreement? Are we on track? With the signing of the Paris Agreement, countries pledged to reduce carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases, as well as to adapt to the impacts of climate change. By scaling up renewable energy, countries can sharply reduce one major source of the problem. Nationally determined contributions, or NDCs, quantify the commitment of each party to reduce CO2 and other greenhouse gas emissions, as well as adapt to the impact of climate change. IRENA, the International Renewable Energy Agency, did an NDC analysis in December based on the new pledges submitted in 2020. Among the findings, to date, 190 parties have ratified the Paris Agreement and 188 have submitted NDCs to the United Nations. Of these, 170 or 90% mentioned renewables, while 134 or 71% included quantified renewable energy targets. While all 134 of those NDCs included renewable energy targets for electricity generation, only 56 included targets for heat and transport. If all renewable power targets included in NDCs were implemented, an additional 1,041 gigawatts of renewables would be added by 2030. And most of that is in Asia. Globally installed capacity of renewable power generation would consequently grow almost 42%. The year 2020 marks the beginning of the formal NDC submission cycle amid the COVID-19 pandemic. However, many countries have missed the deadline. During 2020, only 18 countries submitted new NDCs. Of these, 10 included quantified renewable energy targets, but only 5 of these targets appeared more ambitious than the previous round of NDCs. So we need a step change in country ambition to meet the Paris Agreement Agreement's long-term temperature goal to keep the increase in global average temperature well below 2 degrees C and pursue efforts to limit the increase to 1.5 degrees C. And I'm just going to finish on this video just to help explain where we're at. So as you can see, RE100 still has a job to do. Whilst things are moving in the right direction, and we're seeing fantastic ambition and innovation from our members, we're still not moving quickly enough. So there's still work to be done. So yeah, we're putting all our efforts into accelerating the transition even further. Thank you.
Thank you, Ross. Very much indeed. That was fantastic. Fabulous presentation. And I think we've already got a couple of questions for you in the chat box. So shall we have a look at those?
Sure.
We have a question. I think the first one was from Alison. You have shown images of water, wind, solar power. Where does nuclear power fit in? Is it to be phased out as coal, gas, oil is? So, over to you, Ross, on that one.
Yeah, so RE100's stance on nuclear is that it's not renewable. So that's because the nuclear fuel that's used isn't renewable, basically. RE100 is a leadership initiative, so we focus on those aspects, and it is challenging to move to 100% renewable with wind, solar, tidal electricity. And during the transition period, I certainly think nuclear has a role to play. But as a leadership initiative, RE100 doesn't recognise it currently. So companies aren't able to source their electricity through nuclear. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, did you want to come back, Alison, on what Ross said? Do you have a follow-up point or question, Alison, or you? I can just add while she's maybe contemplating a response. I know for myself that nuclear has remained quite an expensive 20th century technology to use. You know, if you look at the complete life cycle of the actual investment into nuclear energy providing baseload electricity, what it is able to provide good, constant, reliable energy, it is really expensive and, of course, extraordinarily risky potentially. So, yeah, it's an interesting one, nuclear, where it's fitting in. I mean, my understanding is that a lot of countries are decommissioning their nuclear power sector. Some countries are still investing in it quite heavily, like China, India, South Korea, and some countries still rely on it very much, like Japan and France. But let's take the next question, shall we? Which I think is from, was it from Susan? Yeah, this is great to hear, but more environment crisis than carbon. How does generating electricity through renewables fit with protecting the natural world and sustainable farming? Oh, that's a good question. Okay, Ross, what's your view on that one, please? Thank you for that question, Susan.
So how does it fit with sustainable farming? Is that the question?
Sustainable farming and also the natural environment. So maybe some, just go back to the question again. Sorry, I'm just clicking it on my chat box. Yeah. How does generating electricity from renewables fit with protecting the natural world and sustainable farming?
Yeah, well, ultimately, that's what we're looking to do, protect the natural world. If we don't protect the natural world, we don't have a world to live in. So that is what all this is geared towards. I understand, you know, certain groups don't like wind farms on the landscape or things, but we've had pylons on our landscapes for generations, and now I think a lot of us ignore them or don't even see them when we look across the landscape. And I think a windmill is much nicer to look at, but this is all geared towards, you know, preserving that and living alongside the natural world and integrating us more into that. So if we can use those forms of energy, that does just that, and we become much more integrated and dependent upon it. So using sunlight, using wind, using those natural forms of electricity to power our modern societies.
Thank you. Did you want to come back, Susan, with a comment, or are you okay?
It was just to ask, really. I mean, I think it's marvellous all this progress is being made, but for a start, wind turbines are incredibly noisy. If you stand next to one, there's a loud whoop, whoop, whoop sound all the time. And also I've heard about things like, for example, the paths of migrating birds. They'll be flying straight into the wind farm, but chopped up in the veins of the wind. So I can understand why people have reservations about them. And they do look, I mean, pylons are only conducting the electricity, they're not actually generating them. So we probably don't need as many of them if the energy is being generated somewhere else. So it's just to consider. The picture you showed in the video of a city of skyscrapers with the occasional tree just looks a hideous place to live, really. And the experience of the importance of the national world for our sanities that we've learnt in the pandemic is anything to go by. We'll all be crackers, really, even if we're renewable. So
yeah, no, you've raised a good point, Susan. I read a study, I think it was last year, somewhere in Scandinavia, and they apparently, if you paint one of the blades of a wind turbine a different colour, it reduces bird deaths by 90% or something huge. So obviously this is a work in progress, and we want to have as little harm as possible. So as the technologies develop, hopefully that noise you talk about will decrease. And yeah, we'll be able to harness things more successfully and less intrusively.
Yeah, and a lot of wind development is going offshore now, isn't it? Especially in the North Sea and parts of the Asia Pacific. We've got so many questions. I mean, I can debate that with you later if you like, Susan, after the webinar. It's my area. But let's go to the next question in the chat box. I think, I'm not too sure, this is from Jed. Yes, Jed Edwards. What evidence, Ross, is there that the companies and nations are living up to their commitments? Comment on that. And there's a follow-on comment which may help contextualize it as well from Jed. While the race to decarbonize is great, this would give major corporations a stranglehold on the supply in the future. Are RE100 encouraging community engagement? And what about the nations that can't afford to decarbonize? How can that problem be dealt with, do you think, please? There's quite a few questions to go on there. But
there are a lot of questions there. So what was the first question there, Chris?
First question again was, what evidence is there that the companies and nations are living up to their commitments? I can see Jed there. You may want to expand on that a bit, maybe after you've responded first, if that's okay. Thanks, Jed.
Yeah, sure. Well, so RE100 was set up with accountability in mind. So all of our members report to us on an annual basis, and we publish that and we make it, so transparency, as I said in the presentation, is key to our initiative. And we think that's the only way to kind of push companies and countries on things like this. We have another initiative called the Under 2 Coalition. So the climate group works with business leaders as well as government leaders. The Under 2 Coalition works with government leaders, and that works with governments at a state and regional level. They similarly ask their states and regions to report to them on an annual basis. So that is all about this accountability to make sure that progress is being made. And the idea, you certainly see it within our membership, is that it also creates a competitive element. So of our 288 members, nobody wants to be left behind. So as soon as they see they're falling behind, you hope it inspires more ambition to kind of move that forward. Does that answer that question?
You want to come back, Jed, with a response? Thanks.
Just a brief one. Is there any independent inspection of their claims and their reports? I wonder.
Not as far as I'm aware. Obviously, you know, the biggest thing at a country level is the UN and the NDCs that I talked about. But there's no sort of you know, as I understand it, countries submit what they think is achievable for them. So there's no level that has to be met. But that is the same with us. But I guess it does create, RE100 does create a competitive playing field for corporates. And corporates tend to be competitive in nature. So they like some healthy competition, and that's what we try to stoke to kind of get them to move. But yeah, I understand what you're saying, that there isn't any kind of formal commitments or kind of like consequences to them not meeting things like that.
We are where we understand that.
There was a follow-on comment actually, which Jed made, which also Alison commented on as well, about community engagement.
Yes.
Are you familiar with any stories of RE100 members who are helping develop, say, local community renewable projects?
Yeah. So from the video I showed of the RE100 Leadership Awards, Chanel won the community engagement category because they're working with communities to provide renewable electricity to those communities, saving them, I think the chap said 5% of their annual budget a year, those households. So that was great to see that our members are doing that. The reason we focus on companies, so RE100 was set up to focus on companies in the commercial and industrial sector, and that's because they account for around half of the world's end-use electricity. So it's purely around an impact point perspective. Basically, we feel that if we get these corporates to shift, we can move a massive part of electricity consumption to renewable. So that's why we focused on the company area. Communities is slightly more difficult, because you've got to get individual households and developers that develop houses to include renewables in their developments. But yeah, our focus is on companies, and that's why.
Thank you very much. Jed, did you want to follow up comments while I'm looking at others?
That was just a quick query about the less developed nations and how we can, even that out really. The poorer nations who can't afford to decarbonize, so they're just sticking coal in the atmosphere.
Yeah, this is my opinion. I'm not actually, and I think there is something in the Paris Agreement about the transfer of technology and how developed nations need to take additional responsibility. But yeah, personally, I entirely agree with you. Like, I think the developed nations need to shoulder a heavy weight of responsibility, because obviously we've done the most polluting so far. But we are looking, I explained that we're looking to move into Africa, initially South Africa, because that's the largest emitter, but we would hope to then increase our impact across the continent, because some of our members do have operations in Africa, and they're looking to us to become more active in that region. So hopefully we'll start to see our work gain traction there as well.
Okay, thank you, Jed. I was going to move on to the next question, which comes from Dan. So his question is, would it be on battery development versus hydrogen power storage? Where do you think the most investment should be placed moving forward in terms of storage technology to support renewables development?
Yeah, it's very interesting. So battery development is already happening at pace. I saw, I think it was November last year, another massive battery project has been given the green light in the UK, in Essex, I think, and that is about triple the capacity of the current largest that's gone live in Yorkshire. And I think, that is going to make, battery storage is the next frontier, basically, for renewables. They are unreliable due to their nature, solar and wind. The sun doesn't always shine and the wind doesn't always blow. So we're going to have to fill those gaps. So storage is going to be essential. So it's great that sort of the battery capacity is moving forward. Hydrogen, we've only been looking at this recently as an organization. But I think hydrogen is more key, as I understand it, to hard to abate sectors and heavy industry changing, which is critical as well. So I think both technologies are critical, and I think that is the lie of the land for this. Like, we're going to need every tool in our toolbox to get to where we need to be by 2050. So, you know, I don't think there's going to be a ranking. We're just going to have to, you know, use as much technology as we can to move society to net zero by 2050.
The sun always shines in Yorkshire, Ross.
Oh, yeah.
Where I'm actually from at the moment. Thank you very much indeed. Dan, shall I move on to the next question? Is that all right? Or did you want to come back to Ross? You're okay?
That's great, thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so another question from Ethan, who is actually the president of our Sustainability Society here at the university, Ross. And he asked, in countries with less developed infrastructure and political instability, how can sustainable energies be implemented in such areas?
That's a really good question. So what we're also seeing with the integration of renewables into our grids worldwide is a fragmentation of the system, basically. So we're, rather than, you know, as we do in the UK, have a national energy grid, there's far more localized microgrids that are being set up. And in regions like Africa, for example, they can, a small village can have its own solar producing capacity. So it's actually quite enabling for less developed communities. And it's providing much more flexibility. Then obviously those microgrids can either be connected into the national grid, or they might be too far from the national grid. So they can operate independently and on their own. But I think, yeah, we're seeing much more flexibility. You know, you can also install small windmills and stuff on buildings as well locally. So these forms of energy are much more flexible and adaptable. And it's great because they're more widely available as well. Yeah, it should be much better for less developed communities.
Yeah, that's the great thing about renewables is the technology scale. Yeah, the various ways you can use them as applications for energy provision. Yeah, thank you very much. Does anyone have any other questions, please? We've had a really good flurry of them, but in the chat box there aren't any more questions. So anyone got any questions I'd like to ask Ross before we finish things up? Yes, Dan, over to you. He's our sustainability manager, by the way, Ross, at Edgehill University. Just
great to meet you, Dan.
Yeah. Great to meet you, Ross, and thank you both for organising this. My question would be, so with my experience working in with various demographics, from younger ages to slightly older ages. I mean, as you all know, students can be a whole plethora of different ages. But if we could focus our energy on specific demographics or age ranges, where do you think that would be best placed?
Good question. I think it would make sense. This is just my personal perspective. It would make sense to focus on the younger generations. Obviously, that's our future, and these are the guys that are going to have to kind of live and breathe renewables and sustainability. So, yeah, I think it should be focused on the younger generations because that's our future, and yeah, we need those guys to really push things forward. But yeah, we're seeing that with, you know, sort of the schools movement and things like that.
Thank you very much. Did you want to come back, Dan, with the comments, or are you okay?
No, it's great. I think, yeah, it's a difficult one because you want to obviously involve everyone, but I think you are right. You are seeing a movement towards younger generations, but I also agree. I think that everyone has a part to play, and it's just finding that place for everyone and how we all fit into the larger puzzle.
100%.
Great, thank you. Any more questions from anyone?
just make
yes,
a comment?
Susan. Yes,
hopefully
please.
the young people will teach the older people, because I think you're right, it's the young people the impetus is there from, but given that there's quite a few of us were slightly on the grey side here, I think that is really so important that, if children tell their parents and the parents tell the grandparents, or the children tell the grandparents, I think the impetus, who won't want to make a better world for their grandchildren? So yes, I think Greta Thunberg's been a fantastic example, hasn't she, really? Yeah.
I think you've hit the nail on the head as well, Susan. I think the biggest influential factor for the older generation is probably their younger generation. So yeah, you're right. So getting the younger generation to have that conversation with the older generation is also key to kind of pushing it through the whole of society.
Thank you. We've got another couple of questions. The first one comes from Lena, who's also a colleague, academic staff colleague at your university, but also works in Merseyside Council as well. Lena, over to you.
Hi, hello. I just wanted to say thank you for your presentation, but I noted also that you say there that there is a kind of a campaign for banks to divest from coal, but of course I think it should be broader than that. So it should be divestment from fossil fuels generally, and obviously pension companies as well, pension funds companies like our one as well in Merseyside. So it's a bigger effort to kind of get the banks to be divesting from all fossil fuels. And that's more like a comment, I believe. But I wanted to ask, where does your company, where does it stand on purchasing carbon offset, or can you get these renewable energy credits, for example, or is that now gone, so that you actually have to be using, the companies have to be actually using renewable energy rather than purchasing kind of offsetting? Thank you.
Good question, Lena. So there's a number of options. So on our website, you'll find the RE100 technical criteria, and that was developed by CDP, who run the technical side of our initiative. And there's a menu of options there. I think there's 6 or 7 options that we accept that organizations can use to source renewable electricity. The first rung on that ladder is renewable electricity certificates. Yeah, they won't necessarily own the capacity, but it shows that that electricity has been produced and that it offsets what they are using. So that's the first rung. But what we're seeing in our membership, and I think this is in the annual report as well, is a move to more impactful sourcing options. So a lot of the time, once companies start on the journey, they start with certificates, but then they move down along the journey and start to do things like PPAs, like I discussed in the presentation, which is far more impactful, or they start to, have on-site generation and put solar panels or wind on their site. So yeah, certificates, we do accept certificates. But it's normally, and this is what we're seeing through our membership, it's the start of their journey where they're used most.
Okay, thank you very much, Lena. We've got a question from Alison, another one. Alison is one of our partners, Ross, from the Liverpool World Centre. So Dr. Alison Clark has asked, I just wonder if Joe Biden is going to make a difference, ... in the United States.
Massively, and the climate group, I think we published a response to his inauguration. It's really exciting that now, obviously, the United States is back on board with the climate community, which is great. I think I did have it somewhere. I think he's promised $2 trillion for a renewable energy transition in the US, which is great. And I think it's either 2030 or 2035, he said the US will be 100% as a country. So it's going to make a massive difference.
I mean, what's interesting, if I can just add something else about the United States, is that, of course, with Trump at the federal government level, they pulled out of the Paris Agreement, although they did it, actually, they could only do it late. But at the state level, there are a number of states that were still pledging to Paris. and a number of large American companies that also took it on board to kind of align their goals to the Paris Agreement as well. But I think what will be interesting for Biden is the international impact of his presidency, because domestically the US has been, you know, despite the efforts of Donald Trump, there's been some quite positive developments on renewable energy development as far as I can observe. But I think the international impact, the impact on the international, you know, community efforts on this should be hopefully also very positive.
Yeah, you're 100% right. Sorry, I just found that figure. So he promised a $2 trillion clean energy revolution and 100% clean electricity across the US by 2035.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you very much, Ross. Well, I think we may have to kind of leave it there for now, sadly. It's been a really fascinating, very stimulating and very informative talk, Ross. Thank you very much indeed. If anyone wants to get in contact with Ross, please email me. Christopher Dent, leader of SustainNET. Just look at the SustainNET website. Jed, I've seen your notice. I'll pass you details about what we do and the webinar series. Okay, Ross, thank you very much indeed. I'm going to kind of email you later to, yeah, just connect and just follow up from our talk.
Sure.
But yeah, on behalf of us all, from our behalf of us all, very, really big thanks.
Thanks
thank you very much indeed. And yeah, thank you, everyone, as well. Have a good day.
Thanks for coming. Yeah, take care.
Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.